Hey everyone, it's Erin Floto here today, and I am here today to do a bit of a review for you. So, as most of you know, I am affiliated with Archer and Olive, so this is actually going to be a sponsored post, and I'm going to be giving you my first thoughts and reviewing the new Archer and Olive Acrylograph pens. I am probably going to stumble over that word a bunch of times, but I am super excited for this. So because I am an affiliate of Archer and Olive, this was actually sent to me early in advance of the pre-order, and I'm going to take a look at you, and this is actually sponsored by Archer and Olive. So thank you so much to Bonnie and her team for providing me with these pens early so that I can take a look. I have a ton of questions about these that were sent to me via Instagram, on my Patreon, Facebook, all the platforms where people have submitted a bunch of questions. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and show you this Neapolitan, because this is the notebook that I'm going to be using, because a lot of questions had to do with using these types of pens on different types of papers. So because the Neapolitan has white, Kraft, and black paper, I'm definitely going to be using this notebook as my primary palette for these pens, but I'll also be taking a look at a few different other paper types because people requested that as well. And I will be looking at pens in the 3mm and in the 0.7. And so because I was sent to these early, I did not get the packaging, so I just used some of my old Archer and Olive boxes that I've gotten my notebooks in, and I stored these, and honestly, it's such a great storage device. So I have all three sets for each of the 0.7 and the 3mm. As you can see, for each of these, they will have their own eco-friendly packaging. But because I was sent this in advance, I did not get that packaging, but they work perfectly in these boxes. So I'm totally happy with that. So this is actually the first time I'm busting out the Neapolitan, so I'm really excited about this as well. So let's go ahead and flip to the last white page and the first Kraft page, and then I'll go over to the black page after that. So a lot of people have been asking a ton of questions about these, like I mentioned. So a lot of people ask me things like, how do they compare to Tombos? How do they compare to other types of pens? Are they a brush pen? What are they? So this is actually more akin to a paint pen. You can see that when you first start out, this is just plain white. That's because the ink is in here and you have to shake it a lot in order to get the ink to come out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with all of these pens. So this is going to take a little while, so I'm not going to just sit here and shake this, because you can hear it makes sounds and this would be extremely distracting through the whole video. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera and then ink a bunch of these up so that we can go ahead and start taking a look. Okay, that was a lot of work, but it's okay because I got to see a lot of colors and I'm super excited about this. Just an FYI, I would suggest doing the initial inking up outside of your planner, particularly with this 0.7. It has a much pointier nib, and so it like caused little perforations in the paper because of how much you have to like push down to get it inked up. So I actually switched to chipboard and that worked a lot better, but I would definitely suggest doing this outside of your notebook before you start doing a pen test in here. If you don't mind, you know, having little bumps and you have like a pen test page in the back of your notebook, by all means go ahead and do it. But I was just finding it a lot easier to do it outside of the notebook. With all that being said, I'm going to go over a little bit of the pens, and then I'm going to go ahead and get into the questions while I'm also swatching out the three different kits. So the pens come in the same 3 sets. So there's the Jewel Selection. So that's this a little bit darker, more muted tones. It comes in the Tropical, which is this really pastel-y vibe going on. And then it also comes in a primary color pack. So it comes in that for both the 3mm and the 7mm. They sell for $32 each. So it also includes 2 replacement tips. So if you can see on here, it had like the tip comes out and then the ink is on the inside. So it comes with replacement tips for 2 of them for each of the sets. So the 3mm of any of the 3 sets, or the 0.7mm for each of the 3 sets. And you can see on here as well, you know, the nib comes out as well on these. So it comes with replacements. Again, I did not get that because I don't have the full set. These were sent to me by the manufacturer. So I actually did notice one of my pens in the 3mm. It comes up a little bit short, as you can see here. So I'm glad that they come with the replacement nibs because I can just pull that out and pop the new one back in. And actually, I'll probably do that with one of the white tips since I don't have the replacement tips. So it works on light or dark paper like I'm going to be showing you. It comes in eco-friendly packaging. So not only is the actual packaging that I didn't get, not only that is that eco-friendly, but the actual packaging of the pen is eco-friendly. So these are actually recyclable. However, when I was watching another video and in the information that Archer and Olive gave us, they do mention that they are going to be trying to do refills. So maybe don't throw these away just yet. They're going to be exploring that option. That option doesn't currently exist. So if you wanted to get more pens, you would have to order the whole pen, but they're looking into getting the actual ink as replacements, and then you can buy replacement tips and things like that as well. So these pens are available for pre-order. So they are scheduled to ship around July 10th, according to the website. So this video is going up on the 8th. So you have until Friday in order to get these available as pre-order. And then in here, it says it's a water-based acrylic ink. So it's perfectly opaque, so it works on white, black, and craft paper. It's also great for layering and blending. So we'll be taking a look at all of that kind of stuff. They come in the 8 signature colors, and then they come with a white pen and a blender pen for each of the packs. So it's 8 colors per set, and then a white and a blender pen on each of those sets. It says the acrylic ink is non-toxic, but is not intended for children under the age of 3. And that's what I've got for you. Oh, and it comes with the cute little Archer and Olive ampersand on the top. So I'm super excited. I'm going to separate these pens out into the different packs and then go ahead and start swatching and answering questions. Okay, so I have the Tropical, I have the Jewel, and I have the primary set over here. I've blown it out a bit so you can see the pens while I'm using them, and then I will get up close and personal while I am doing the actual swatching. So I am going to go ahead and start with these 3mm because this gets the most bang for your buck in terms of coloring large amounts of space versus the 0.7 where I'm going to be doing a lot more writing with it. These, just based on me doing the pen test and my experience with paint type pens, is that the 3mm are good for like larger headers and filling in large sets of color spaces, whereas the 0.7 are more akin to like a fine liner that you can write with. So let's go ahead and get started. So just initially, these are very juicy. So you are gonna have to wait a little bit if you wanna write over them. Like this one is still a little juicy, but you saw that it took that entire row for that one to become quite dry. This palette screams very much summer to me. I love this palette. I'm gonna go ahead and use the black 0.7 to write tropical next to this. Moving on to the jewel. It is giving a very nice opaque color. Like I don't feel like I have to go over any of these again. I think maybe like this mint might have been a little bit light, but overall I don't really feel like I'm having to go over them multiple times in order to get a very vibrant color, which I really appreciate. And I'm gonna leave the white out of this because I'm gonna do its own pen test with like writing over. So this is the one that I mentioned that the tip is having a little bit of an issue. However, you can still write with it like this. It's just a little weird, like switching back and forth between one that has a larger tip and one that has a smaller one. But it writes just fine if you didn't want to change it out. So, and just as it naturally is with these types of tips, you can like see a little bit of fraying along the edges. As you can see, kind of when it comes to a stop on the edge, there's just a little bit of fraying because it's a very fibrous type of nib. So if I start to run my finger, you can see that all of this has dried, except probably the last two. So up until that point, up until these last two, and it was just at the end where your nib stops. And obviously what I was writing with the primary collection, that's where you're starting to have issues. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a, like, I guess essentially a quick dry test, because you can see if I do this, it's not drying right away. So I'm gonna leave it for a little bit and see how long it takes to dry. Okay, so you can see there was still a little bit at the end. And you can see just a little bit at the end. Okay, now that these have dried, I want to go ahead and test it on the Kraft paper. Wow, I'm a little surprised at that grade. That showed up a lot better than I thought it was going to. Some of these are definitely juicier than others. I don't know if that's because of how I did like the pen test, if I held those down a little bit longer, not the pen test, like inking up the pen. I don't know if that's because I held them down longer or not, but you can definitely tell that some of these are extremely juicy. And then the ones that are juicy, like these three were extremely juicy. Those show up a lot more opaque. This one too, extremely juicy. Extremely juicy. I don't think that would be an issue if you just hold it down a little bit longer. I was trying to get the ink going for nearly 60 pens. So I was trying to go a little bit fast, but I don't think that would be a huge issue just to hold it down a little bit longer. And then moving on to the primary collection. I'm really pleased because some of these colors that I didn't think that like they would stand out quite as much really have proven me wrong here. My favorite of all of them right now is this like indigo like pen. This like bluey purple. I love that pen. That's definitely my favorite of all of them currently. And so this is what I was kind of talking about with the fraying. You can see this tip having like the fibers go off a little bit, but it's not causing a lot of issues. So I'm used to it because that is very prevalent in these types of nibs with paint pens. And these aren't typically the pens that you would be writing with anyways. So I'm gonna pause here really quick and I'm gonna show you a few of like how the Poscas are on this so that I can compare them a little bit. Like I said, I do like holding these better because it is a smaller tube that holds everything. These don't bother me. So you can see this one also has that fraying type of tip. It's just what happens with these. So this is the exact same concept as these Posca markers. So I think that would come down to a personal preference for me based on how, first of all, there's a lot more color options in the Archer and Olive. So I would lean that way just for color options because that's just how I am. I need to have all the colors of all the pens. So that would probably sway me that way as well. And then one of the other things is, again, just the sheer how you hold it. It's just so much more familiar to me because all of the other pens I have, it's a similar thickness to these types of pens. I think Tombow is just a touch thick. No, they're about the same. If anything, Archer and Olives is maybe just a touch wider than the Tombows, but it's just so much more akin to everything else that I hold that I would probably lean that way. Okay, and all of these are dry, so I'm going to go over to the black and then test there as well. These have me wanting to get back into my blackout notebook right this second. Because I think one of the things that I said is that I was so limited on colors while I was working in the blackout notebook. I had all of the jelly rolls, but I was really stuck using jelly rolls and I couldn't use Tombos. There's some other brush pens that can also be used, the Kuretake brush pens and things like that. But man, this would just expand that color palette tenfold. Yep, this is still my favorite color pen. I don't know why that color just speaks to me. It speaks to me so much. And when I get to the primary, I'm going to switch out the white for the black so that you can take a look at that. That's really opaque. That did great. That did great on this paper. I've had issues in the past with using whites, and the white jelly roll is nice to work with, but you have to write slowly, and that I don't feel like I have to write slowly. So that's definitely a plus, however many for that one. Oh, I love that green on the black paper. That looks so good. Oh, and that mustard. Yo. Okay. You know what? Black paper just makes everything more awesome. I'm really enjoying working with these. And I know some people are going to be like, oh, well, this is a sponsored post. You got this stuff for free, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, I'm not going to blow smoke up your butt either. The reason I am affiliated with this company is because I truly believe in their products and have had amazing experiences with them. And honestly, this one is no different. Now, I will say that for me, unless I'm doing large scale, actually, that's not quite true. I was about to say, unless I'm doing large, like, coloring projects, I probably wouldn't use these. The 3mm ones versus the 0.7mm ones. But that's actually not quite true because I can see myself using these to give a background to headers, for example. And we'll start playing with overlapping these and layering them as well. The only color I think I'm like a bit disappointed in is this yellow. So let me see if this is a me problem or if this is a pen problem. Maybe I just didn't have it inked enough. Let's see how that dries a little bit more. It's drying just a little bit patchy. So like these, you can see the actual strokes when it doesn't have, like when you need to push down to give it a little bit more oomph to the paint. But that one was definitely a little bit, it wasn't as vibrant and as opaque as these other ones were. So that's the only one that I'm like a bit bummed right now about how that one's performing. And let's go ahead and start practicing with some layering. So let's go with my favorite color. Why not? And let's just write a big hello. So it's super comfortable when you're writing this big with the 3mm, but if I were to try to write on one line, I don't think it would be as comfortable. And I'm gonna go ahead and try that. Yeah, it's definitely not quite as comfortable and it feels a little bulky if I'm trying to use a 3mm. But to be honest, that's because these are 5mm squares, so I wouldn't really expect it to be super comfortable. but I did say that I would like to try this with headers, so I'm gonna go ahead and do like a little background for a header, and then we'll write over it and see how I like that. And I'm gonna get more into writing with the 0.7s as well. So let's, okay, that is dry. So let's go ahead and write hello. Let's just write it hello again, but in a script. So let's make sure there's some ink to play with. Oh, that writes over really well. So I will zoom in here so that you can see. It doesn't even really need a second layer. Maybe on this H, it needed a second layer. But overall, you can easily discern the difference, and you can layer those. So let's go ahead and try it just on top of each other. Yeah, that doesn't need a second coat at all. That's great. That's awesome. What about other colors on top of other colors? Let's go ahead and try it. I'm definitely leaning, and this is just my preference, I'm definitely leaning more towards the tropical colors. I love that color palette. But I know Haley has these, and I know that she's gonna lean towards the jewel. That is totally her vibe. Let's try this blue against it, even if it's in a different collection. Yeah, that looks great. They're definitely layering on top of each other really, really well. Now let's also get some of the juicy ones and see if we can blend them. My juicier ones are darker. Let's do these two and just juice them up a little bit. Now, I don't really know about this blending pen because there's nothing inside. So you're basically just taking a blank nib and blending them together. So I don't quite know how I feel about that yet, but I guess I will be finding out shortly. I don't really like the blending situation. It's not my favorite. Then again, I feel that way with all blending pens though. So that's not real, that might be a me thing and not an Archer and Olive thing, because I feel the same way about the Tombow blending pen. I just don't like it that much. And maybe this isn't how it's meant to be blended, because it really, at this point, feels like it's taking a bunch of the ink away instead of blending it. I don't know. I don't get the blending pen. The blending pen isn't my thing. And I'm going to try some blending on here also with two of my pretty juicy numbers. Yeah, it's much easier to blend if you just use the other marker and blend back into it. That works out so much better. But again, maybe that's a me thing. But it's looking really, really cool. I'm gonna bring out my Scribbles That Matter the one that I use for pen tests and things like that. So that we can take a look at how these hold up in that notebook as well. And while the bottom's drying, I'm gonna go ahead and put some of the white over top because I want you to see how the white reacts and like if you need multiple layers. The white holds up really well. I think some of them could use maybe a second layer, but overall it holds up really well. So this one, you can see that this ghosts a lot more than it does in the Archer and Olive. It's still not bleeding through or anything like that. So I think you're safe to use these, but if ghosting bothers you, I mean, you can see on some of my other pen test pages, this is from the line that their Scribble That Matters paper was not as high a quality and they got called out for it. So just an FYI there, like this isn't their standard paper either, but this is the other notebook that I have available to do these pen tests in. So this is like the 100 GSM, but it was acting more like probably a 90. So you can see the ghosting in here. For those who were interested in seeing on a different quality paper, some ghosting, not bleeding, so definitely holds up. So I have a bunch of questions that were sent to me. Some folks asked, how long do they last? Which I don't know because that's more of a long-term thing. So I'm happy to continue using these and then let you know kind of while I'm using them, how like I feel they're holding up. But if it's anything compared to the Poscas, I use the Poscas all the time for my packaging, and those have held up for quite a long time. So if it's anything like that, I think that they'll hold up. I'm curious about the 0.7 millimeter because if I'm going to use that as a writing utensil, then that's going to be used a lot more than, you know, some of these other types of markers. So I'm interested to do that. So I will start using them over time and let you know what I think. Is the color story compatible with a lot of themes? If you're getting all three of them, then for sure. This is very, like, for any sort of fall palette, this is a great fall palette in particular. That Jewel collection for spring and summer months, maybe the tropical, and then you can't go wrong with a primary in my humble opinion. In my opinion, are they worth the extra money? Which set is my favorite? I definitely lean more towards the tropical set, and I'll cover a few more questions before I get to, in my opinion, are they worth the money? Because that was the number one thing people had asked me when they submitted questions for this review. How do they look being used as fine liners or for headers / calligraphy? Like I said, I think the 3 millimeters are definitely more of like a headers or filling in broad things. But if you're looking for a fine liner, your 0.7 is gonna be the way you go. So like, it's super comfortable writing in the 0.7 in this, like in these 5 millimeter boxes. how small can I write? So I want to try writing as small as I can. So you can get pretty small with these. If you have very small handwriting, I would suggest trying to make it a little bit bigger, because in some areas, like in this E, it's a little bit hard to differentiate, but it's nice and easy to write with. How much difference is there in using the larger tip for filling in larger spaces than the smaller 07? Definitely a difference. If I mark this space, it will take me quite a bit of time to do this. But if I switch over to the 3mm, just by the sheer logic of it, it's gonna take significantly less time to do even more space. So it's kind of what you think you're gonna use it for. If you are not interested in doing a lot of background colors or filling in headers afterwards or something like that, maybe like you can pick and choose. You can pick both if you want. I mean, honestly, that's where my brain goes to, because I really like pens. But you know, if you are on a budget, then I would think that you need to figure out what your intention to use them for is. If it's something like doing headers or doing the line work for your spreads, I maybe might go with a 3mm. If you're doing a little bit more intricate details and things like that, I might go with a 0.7, or if you're writing with it, I might go with a 0.7. It's just a different feeling pen, and I've never used a pen like this before, so I'm interested in trying it out, like for a more long-term thing versus just writing, you know, a sentence in my bullet journal. I'm going to do that while I'm testing everything out over time and see how I like it, and continually check back in with you. Do they dry matte? How opaque are they? Can you write over them with pen permanent marker? Let's go ahead and try writing it over in pen. So the micro perm is significantly more permanent. Yeah, you can write over that just fine. Sometimes when you're writing over other types of inks, it will create this chalky texture on the outside of your other pen's nib, and I'm not getting that with these pens. And then can I do it with a gel pen? So I'm gonna try it with the Jelly Roll and with the Muji. So Jelly Roll writes just fine on it, and unlike when you write over with Tombos, it doesn't take in that color. It keeps the white color, which is really, really nice. And same issue with the Muji as with the other type of micro perm. Writes just fine, and it doesn't create a weird texture that I'm not able to continue writing. And you can see how opaque they are. They do get fairly opaque. You can see on a lot of these, like you can't even see the dot in the middle. Some of them you can for the lighter colors, but a lot of them are like fairly opaque that you can't even see the dots. And yes, they dry matte. They don't dry shiny. What pack would I recommend? Again, this is very personal to what kind of color story you like and what kind of pens you're trying to use. I personally would probably go with the Tropical and the 0.7mm, because I do want to try writing with them a lot more. And I don't usually do these like large spanses of color that I need to write over. That's just not really a theme that I do. It might be nice to draw. I'm doing a really bad jellyfish, since jellyfish was one of my recent themes. Like, this is super easy to work with, so I don't think I would have a problem either way. I think just in particular, I would like to try writing out, so I think it's just my own personal preference that I would go with the 0.7. But for coloring and doing a lot of that type of work, what I do really like and I want to note is that for Tombows, when you use Tombows and with Crayolas and other types of pens like this, it leaves streaks. Like even if you do it like this, sometimes you can get that streakiness in there. If you're coloring like in two different sections and there's any sort of overlap in those sections, you get the little streaks. But if you are doing just a solid block of color in here, you get some streakiness in here. But if I were to do this and then go over this, it's so fluid. It's just one block of color. And if I'm doing this, you know, you can see the brush like streaks, but you can't see like the overlapping streaks, if that makes sense at all. If you're coloring, and if I color on top of here, you're not seeing where the overlap is. It's just one streak of color, if that makes sense. So I do like that a lot in terms of being able to color in your bullet journal and work on themes in your bullet journal and any sort of artwork in your bullet journal. Another person asked me how they interact with commonly used pens. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to write over this Tombow with the Acrylograph 0.7. It writes perfectly fine. And I was actually a little worried if it was going to have an issue in terms of like bringing up any of the paper, but that actually worked out really well. It didn't feel like I was working the paper too much where some of the paper lifts a little bit. Maybe I can make that happen. You can see how like it lifts some of the paper up, but that's not the feeling that I got when I put this pen over the Tombow. So I like that it's not overworking the paper. Do they sound, or someone said they sounded scratchy on Archer and Olive's video. Does that make them difficult to use? And so far, no, I haven't had an issue. It does sound scratchy, if you can hear that. They do have like a scratchy texture in these 0.7s because of how the nib actually is. It's literally like a plastic casing and it's scratching against the surface and there's just ink coming out of it. So it is scratchy, but it doesn't make it uncomfortable to work with, if that makes sense. Someone asked if they're dual tip. No, it is just the one tip. So you have the 3mm and then you have the 0.7 and a different pen altogether. Do they smudge and bleed? So they do smudge. This is definitely a pen to take your time with. That's just how it's gonna be because this is much more like it's applying on top of the paper. It's not like soaking right into the paper. Like a Tombow soaks right into the paper versus this, and that's kind of how you're getting the opacity, is it's sitting on the paper and drying like on top of the paper versus getting soaked in, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does. So I'm really hoping you all understand what I'm trying to say, but that's how you get such a like really strong opacity with this as well. Someone asked if they are better than Tombows. I think it's just a different beast. There's a lot more for the color selection in Tombow. So in that regard, I would probably go with Tombow. And if you're wanting to do lettering, then it's hands down Tombow. If you're wanting to do spreads where you're writing, if you want to do drawing and things like that in your Archer and Olive or in whatever notebook you may have, I would lean towards the Acrylograph, because one thing that has always bothered me about Tombow, and that like I wish I could use an alcoholic marker like a Copic in my journal, but those bleed like crazy. So this is kind of the best of both worlds, that you get this nice layer of color without the streakiness. And that's something that's always bothered me with Tombow, especially because if you work the Tombow too much to make it a very solid layer of color, then it lifts up your paper. And for 160 GSM, that's totally fine, but for other types of papers, maybe not. So I think this is kind of a best of both worlds because you are getting such an opaque color. The blending, I think probably they're about equal when it comes to blending. The issue that you would have with Tombow over the acrylographs is the acrylographs aren't lifting up the paper as much as a Tombow would. You saw that that was only a couple strokes when I did this Tombow, and it was starting to lift up the paper. So that's something to keep in mind. So those were all the questions that I received, except for the one that everyone wanted to know. Are they worth the money? So I can't speak to everyone's financial situation. Obviously, these pens are going to cost a little bit more, especially because a white and a blending pen are included in every single set. I kind of wish that the blending pen weren't included, that you could just like buy that separately, because, and I think this with the Tombow sets as well, whenever you get a Tombow set, if you're not buying the entire Tombow kit, like all 100, however many Tombows there are, then you get a blending pen with each and every single pack that you get. And I just think it's kind of a waste. Maybe for some people that do like to blend using the blending pen, that might be nice, but I just kind of find them useless. I'm not a blending pen type of person. I wish that that wasn't included. Do I think it's worth the money? For me, this is serving a need that I feel like it's worth it in my style of journaling because I do a lot of artwork. So I would say that, again, I'm not really sure because I haven't written with these 0.7s enough. So I will let you know after I use these a little bit more if I like this style pen better than like a gel pen or a fine liner or anything like that. I will have to let you know because right now I don't really know if the 0.7 is worth the money. I do think that the 3mm is. So for me, the color selection is gorgeous and it's serving a need that isn't currently being met in the bullet journaling community. I love my Tombows. I love using super tips, but you can't get a consistent, very opaque color with those types of pens. And so this has a lot more color options than the paint pens that are currently on the market. Paint pens that are currently on the market are essentially 5 pastels and your primary color palette, maybe some gold and silver thrown in there also. So this is a much more extensive color palette that I think is personally worth it to me. But you are paying, and I'll say I do like the white included in every pack because white is probably what I would use the most, especially if I go back to the blackout journal, which like this has me craving going back to the blackout journal so badly. I'm wondering if I'm going to switch back sooner than I thought I was going to do. I will let you know. I do really like this better than I like the Jelly Roll pen. And that's saying a lot because I love that Jelly Roll pen, but I can write so much quicker with this pen than I can with a Jelly Roll pen, and it shows up on so many different types of markers. I actually do want to check because I've had issues with the Jelly Roll and it turning very gray, so I'm actually pretty curious how this is going to turn out. Yeah, so this goes a little gray as well, but I do like that I can write much quicker with these pens than I can with a Jelly Roll. So I do think that the white also brings something to the table. For me, I'm gonna have to let you know on the 0.7s because for real, I only see those as a fine liner. I don't really see those in terms of, I mean, yes, maybe adding details to like a flower or something like that. So if I'm just adding a flower in here or a leaf, whatever, and I want to do some details around it, then this could be nice for doing a little bit of detail work on a leaf or something like that. So in that respect, you know, probably, but that's not what I see that pen as. I see that pen as more of a fine liner. And for me, I won't know until I use it as a fine liner a lot. But for sure, I like the 3mm in terms of doing art in your bullet journal. I think that it serves a tremendous need in the bullet journaling community. It is, I love the color stories that are created. I can't wait to try this color story for the fall. I'm really, really excited because fall, being a basic white girl, fall is my favorite season of the year. So I'm really excited about it. Personally, I think they're worth the money, but I'm also someone that will dish out money for supplies that I really, really want, and pens being some of those supplies. So I can't make any financial decisions for you because you are spending a bit more. But for a paint pen that may be refillable soon, I don't know. I think it's worth a shot. I'm really, really excited to use these. I'm really, really excited to get to try these as fine liners. Again, this is something that I've literally never been able to use as a fine liner. It's something that I've never worked with before. And I personally have not really seen on the market before. So I'm really, really excited to use the 0.7 just because I think it's like a hugely brand new thing. And people can fight me in the comments or let me know that I'm wrong in the comments. It's just not something that I've seen a lot of. So I'm really interested to try it. And then I really think that opening up so many color options in like the paint pen type of world is a lot of fun. And I can't wait to try a lot more pens. So especially if I have like figured another new thing out, I will promise to keep you in the loop in terms of like me trying out new things with these pens. You can always go to Archer and Olive's Instagram because Bonnie is constantly doing Instagram stories about these pens and things like that. So keep that in mind. So I'm really excited to try these out. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, or if you have, I'm going to be doing follow-up videos to this. So if you have any other questions or want me to try anything with these, please let me know in the comments below so that I can do it on my Instagram stories. I can do it on my Instagram feed. I can include it in the next video because I want to make sure that everyone's getting their questions answered. So I hope this video was super helpful for you in terms of trying to figure out if you're going to purchase these or not. And I hope you like this video. Please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, all that kind of jazz. And I will see you next time. Bye, everyone.